Konnichiwa, hajimashite, konnichiwa desu. And today is going to be my very first review, and I'm actually kind of excited to present this because this is of the M2 Carbine by King Arms. Now, a short history about the M2 Carbine. Now, the M2 Carbine in itself is basically an M1 Carbine variant with the capability to go full auto, although interestingly enough, the original M1 Carbine was supposed to have a full auto capability, such that the fire selector switch was located to the left of the rifle, but unfortunately, the US Army needed the M1 Carbine into the field as soon as possible, as soon as it was adopted in 1942, so designers just had to omit the fire selector switch, and the M1 Carbine wouldn't exactly get a fire selector switch until around September 1944, and thus the M2 Carbine was born. Unfortunately though, by the time that the M2 Carbine was released, or rather it made its way to Europe, the war with Germany was at a closing stage, which means it didn't see that much action in Europe anymore. Although in the Pacific, there were some kits that were sent to convert M1 Carbines into M2s. There were some certain parts that allow it to have the capability to go full auto, and as well as some original M2 Carbines that were sent to the Pacific, and those carbines fought in the closing battles in the Philippines, Iwo Jima, and as well as Okinawa. Although the story of the M2 Carbine wouldn't end there, because the M2 Carbine found itself in the hands of GIs in Korea and as well as in the Vietnam War. For Lend-Lease, the M2 Carbine was very well used by the British during the Malaya Emergency, which was issued to mostly patrols and some guards. Hey, yeah? You do realize why the hell are you wearing a British Commando uniform when you're using the wrong gun? Why not? I don't have much of a uniform anyways. Besides, no one donates to me. Ha ha ha. Farb. Fuck you. Anyways, moving forward. Now, King Arms wouldn't be the very first one to release an M2 Carbine in the market, because there was already one that was made by Marushan, but unfortunately that was 10 years ago. It was either phased out or discontinued. Those are probably one of the most expensive replicas in the market right now, and you'd be hard-pressed to find one. Frankly, I am very happy that King Arms has finally decided to release an M2 Carbine. I probably already thought to myself that King Arms was going to be making an M2 Carbine because they already made an M1 Carbine, which in itself was basically a clone of the Marushan M1 Carbine. I wouldn't frankly be surprised if this was a Marushan clone too. And being that this is powered in green gas, I'm actually quite very happy. And I probably would expect that it wouldn't leak that much, unlike the King Arms M1 Carbine. Now, I haven't exactly owned an M1 Carbine before that was made by King Arms, but I've had so many friends who have complained about with the King Arms M1 Carbine leaking all around. Shout out to Sir Sonny! Which is why I have mixed feelings about getting a King Arms M1 Carbine. Some may say it's good, some may say it's bad, others say that they're mixed, but being that it's got a mixed reception in the Airsoft world, I thought to myself that I wouldn't probably get one, and I'd probably wait a gas version one. And when King Arms came out with the M2 Carbine, and it was going to be green gas powered, I opted to myself that this was probably the chance for me to own one. The rifle in itself would weigh about 2,520 grams. Add the magazine, which is 600 grams, and you get 3,120 grams, compared to the real M2 Carbine that has a weight of 2,820 grams. Seriously, King Arms? The replica itself weighs a lot more than the real thing. Well, so much for being called a lightweight carbine. Damn it, this thing is so heavy! Now let's go over to the features of the M2 Carbine in itself. Starting with the front, you'll get your bayonet lug here, which is accurately correct for an M2 Carbine, as with all late war carbines that had a bayonet lug and a new rear aperture sight. Going on to the middle of the gun, you'll get your magazine cache here. To release and insert a new mag. And then you'll have your safety lever here, horizontal for fire, and vertical for safety. Moving over onto the buttstock, you'll have your port here with the oiler in. Now, the oiler that I have here is basically just for props. It's not meant to be used. It's not a real oiler. It's basically just a repro. So if you guys have a repro oiler, don't even put oil on it. We're in Airsoft anyway. Moving over onto the other side, you can see that the oiler serves as a second point for the sling here. And you'll have here your fire selector switch, front for full auto, and rear for semi. And you'll also have the first part, or rather the first point, of the sling mount here. The rear sights are adjustable. You can adjust for windage, but one thing that kind of turns me down is that you can't actually adjust the sights for elevation. But we're in Airsoft anyways, so I guess it wouldn't be bothersome. But damn, it could have been cool if the rear aperture sight could be adjusted for elevation. To disassemble and service your M2 Carbine, you first have to remove the screw here, and then after that, you remove the upper handguard, and you'll see a large screw here underneath. Then you unscrew it, and then you unscrew this as the last one. Unfortunately, guys, I won't be showing you how to disassemble it. I already showed you guys how to disassemble it in my how to attach the pouch and the sling video. I'll be leaving it in the comments down below so you guys can watch it. But please, for the love of God, don't bring me the hassle of disassembling it while on a review. Now, as for the accessories, you can put an M1 Carbine pouch here, the sling, and the oiler. Although these are M1 Carbine pouches, they were used as well on M2 Carbines. And of course, in real life, M2 Carbines could fire the 15-round box magazines from the M1 Carbine, and they can be fitted here, but unfortunately, the King Arms M1 Carbine mags couldn't fit into these types of pouches, so basically, this pouch is just here for displays or making it pretty. Just in case if it doesn't, you have to Dremel the sides here to make sure that your bayonet can fit. As for scope, you can probably remove the sights here, so you can put a scope, or you could even go for that crazy M3 Carbine look, which makes it look like some kind of gun with a big scope, which is enough for you to be seen like a stalker. The operation in itself is realistic because it is a gas blowback rifle, and one thing to note, there is a pin here for the to hold the charging lever in the back, like in the real thing. So you can put some BBs in there, and then you can just let go of that charging lever, and you're basically ready to go. That's usually how I am every time in the battle. I always put the lever in the back, insert the magazine, release it, and I'm good to go. Oftentimes I'm a little bit worried about my nozzle breaking every time I put the magazine and then I cock it. Frankly, I gotta tell you guys that it already happened to me that I broke a nozzle with one of my old guns. But then again, 12-year-old me wasn't particularly the most disciplined one. For upgradability, you can definitely upgrade your M2 Carbine. The inner barrel is about 267 millimeters long, and the hop-up is located here. You can adjust it using a 1.5 hex key, and frankly, it's a little bit too tiresome. I would have actually preferred the same hop-up adjustment as you can find on SNT, or you can just make a small hole here and you can just adjust it from there using a hex key. I mean, I'd be fine even if the hop-up was to be adjusted with a hex key, but being like in this and I couldn't see the knob itself, it's probably not the best for me. Well, I've seen worse. The RWA Lee Enfield needed you to remove the front handguard just so you can access the hop-up. Not particularly the best. Unlike the Marusian M2 Carbine, this thing doesn't come with markings. There's no markings here, and there are no markings here. Sad. Although probably if King Arms were to give this gun some markings, they would probably have to acquire some licenses. And which also brings the fact that the price of the gun might raise because of the licenses. Speaking of the price, the gun costed me 26,000 pesos in Philippine money, and if you'll translate into American dollars, it'll cost about 510 USD. Aye! But at the level of the quality, the craftsmanship of the replica itself, I'd say GG. GG King Arms. And definitely if you really would add some markings, it would cost about $550. Ouch. That already costs way more than my Sten Mark V. Well, it's true that I prefer the Sten Mark V anyway. In addition to the original M2 Carbine, King Arms also made the Paratrooper variant, as you can see here, although I probably wouldn't see myself using the Paratrooper M2 Carbine. It wasn't probably particularly known, because the one that was more well known for the Paratroopers is the M1A1 Carbine, which had no fire selector switch and also only used 15 round magazines. So definitely I stuck with the original M2 Carbine because this really looks way more accurate, and frankly I'm more of a fan of this. And if we go over onto the buttstock pad, you'll see that there is one screw there wherein it is a flathead screw, which is quite periodically accurate, and as well as the attention to detail that King Arms gave. So for King Arms, another GG. As for the feeling of the gun, for a 3,120 gram rifle, I'd say that it's quite relatively light, given that this is an M2 Carbine, it's a lightweight carbine, and even though that it weighs 200 grams more heavier than the original M2 Carbine, I'd say that I'm still happy, so definitely that's another thumbs up for me. It's quite relatively accurate, and you can also run with this all day long. As for the kick itself, there isn't that much of a kick, although you can feel it. Hey, yeah, can you explain kick? What do you mean kick? You're getting kinky, aren't you? No, tell me, how's the kick of it? Kick? When I say kick, it means recoil. Of course. But when you feel the kick, do you also hear the screams? Who screams again? You know, screams. Those moans. Oh, I hear it now. So who are you gonna name that rifle to? I'm actually gonna name it Barbara. You play way too much Genshin Impact. Why not? Barbara is a fitting name for this, doesn't it? Feels like a medic gun, and Barbara is our medic in Genshin Impact, so she deserves the name Barbara. Seriously, you play way too much Genshin Impact. Aw, come on now, man. Doesn't the M2 Carbine scream the name Barbara? I'll let you decide that, guys. Leave it in the comment below if you think that Barbara is a good name for the M2 Carbine. Anyways, moving on. Another thing is that the front sight can be adjusted here with a hex key. Adjust it a bit, but be careful because the sight itself tends to move way too much, like it's slippery, so as much as you can, try to look through the sights and find yourself a comfy view of where you want to put the sight, and then immediately twist the hex key up to make sure the sight is locked in place. And one more thing to note, guys, if you're putting the M1 Carbine pouch on this thing, note to put some foam or a part of a sponge here so that the knob here itself, as you can see here, wouldn't try to damage the stock. Because at the level of realism, the shape of the stock itself, the stain is quite already realistic for me, so I wouldn't see myself stripping this and then restaining it again. I probably will keep this as it is until probably it wears off, and then I can restain it again to my preferences. As for stripping it and code bluing it, I probably wouldn't do it as well, so I'll probably just let it age until I decide that it should be enough for me to... The metals are made of Zamak, unfortunately, but the paint itself reflects a parkerized finish, which probably would be correct for a late war carbine anyways. So all in all, I definitely will keep this M2 Carbine as it is for now. Now let's go over onto the shooting test. I'll be using 0.2 gram BBs for the chrono, and then for the shooting test, I'll be using 0.3 gram BBs at 25 feet using target plates and a paper target. Alright guys, so 25 feet, 0.3 gram BBs, shooting test, 15 rounds, using the target plates. All hit. empty. Grouping test, 30 rounds, 15 for semi, 15 for full auto, baby. Leak free. Semi-auto. Firing. Full auto, baby. Out. Looking back at the shooting tests, we can see that the King Arms M2 Carbine shoots at a respectable 370 to 390 FPS. And then as for the shooting test, for the plate test, we can see that 8 rounds out of 15 shots hit. Could have been better, sadly. But for the groupings test, we can see that the groupings that the King Arms M2 Carbine had really good groupings. Could have been better if it was aiming, if it was all landing on the bullseye, but still, this is really solid. So to summarize it all in all, the King Arms M2 Carbine is definitely quite skirmishable in its own way, although for the spare parts, definitely I would recommend that you find some spare nozzles and as well as other moving parts, maybe like the bolt. It's up to you on what kind of spare parts that you're gonna be getting for this thing. Now before to end the video, let us go to the pros and cons of the gun. First off, it is realistic. It's true to the real deal, 1:1 scale. You can put the pouches and the slings as well of a repro. You can also put some originals here, but unfortunately, I don't have originals here. I wanted to do repros because I wouldn't want to destroy an original pouch and M1 Carbine sling here. So I opted to the repro, but at least it gives that nice M2 Carbine look. And being that this is also a gas blowback rifle, which adds over also to the realism, thankfully it's not an AEG, because if it was an AEG, I would have probably cried. I don't know. I don't see myself going through the gearbox of this thing. Apart from that, it is also quite gas efficient. I can fire all 30 rounds in a single load of gas, and definitely it's not that much of a problem. You can also fire it on full auto depending on how you really want to fire your carbine. Apart from that as well, it is quite ergonomic. As you can see here, I'm a righty, although I'm ambidextrous. I can reach for the lever here. It's on fire. Now it's on safety, and it's on fire again. And I can operate the bolt. And then for lefties, it's not much of a problem as well. Like I said, I'm ambidextrous. I can operate the bolt, remove the magazine, and then twist the safety lever. So definitely, it's gonna be a really fun rifle for lefties, guys. In addition, it is also quite light. It lives up to its name of a lightweight carbine, so I wouldn't have much of a problem. I wouldn't also have strained shoulders carrying this into the field. And definitely, it is really skirmishable. It is quite accurate, and I don't have much of a problems in there. Now, as for the cons, first off, of course, no markings, but I can understand that, being that it might have probably added more to the cost of the rifle. But so far, I don't see that much of a problem anyways. It's just mostly for the looks. But overall, as it is, the M2 Carbine has really quite a demanding look anyways. Apart from that, the magazine can sometimes tend to load a little bit tedious. So sometimes, if you guys notice me on the video, I often end up knocking the magazine out with my palm just to make sure, as you can see there, just to make sure that it's in. Now that I've punched it, it's now all the way in. And then there's another technique apart from you using the palm, because your palm, once you use your palm, it's gonna hurt. So you have to align the magazine itself on with the magwell, and then with all your might, push it, and your magazine will stay in place. Although, I'm actually gonna prefer with using my palm right now, because it's Call of Duty style reloads, guys. And for the last con, the disassembly. It's gone already of a hassle. I wouldn't go there anymore. it's quite a horrible experience anyways. So I wouldn't see myself disassembling this anymore unless I have to lubricate something or I have to replace it. So overall, this M2 Carbine deserves the name of Barbara. You play way too much Genshin Impact.
Barbara,
So that's it for this video, and if you guys liked it, please consider giving it a like down below and subscribe as well. And if you guys have any other questions regarding the King Arms M2 Carbine, please feel free to leave it in the comments below. And also please donate to my Patreon or to my coffee. Frankly, I'm actually quite poor because not only that I'm maintaining World of Tanks Blitz, I also have to maintain Airsoft. And thank you guys so much for watching. You've all been awesome, and hopefully I'll see you guys in the next video and on the battlefield.